I see you marrying a corpse, living in a grave.
Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes, or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. So please subscribe when you are finished listening. You can also go to classicmovierev.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. You can also find a link to purchase the ABCs of Film Noir there on the website or in the show notes. Today's movie is Son of Dracula, 1943. The movie was directed by Robert Siodmack. It is rated 6.2 on imdb.com and is rated 60% on the Tomato Meter and 33% audience approval on RottenTomatoes.com. This movie has a couple of firsts. This was the first time a man's transformation into a bat was filmed. Earlier versions did not show the transformation, they cut away. Chaney Jr. was the first vampire to show great physical strength. Also of note, there were no fangs shown in this or any other vampire film until the Mexican film El Vampiro 1957. Nate Yap on ClassicHorror.com says, quote, "Some irreparable mistakes were made at a very early stage of production, and this film will be forever marred by the poor judgment of some myopic decision maker. Such is the case with Lon Chaney Jr. as Count Dracula in Universal's misleadingly titled Son of Dracula. Chaney's inability to pull off the old world nobility required for the part has dogged this film's reputation since its release. This is a shame, really, since the rest of this mature, atmospheric chiller works quite well." Unquote. A.H. Weller of the New York Times said, quote, "Despite all of the accepted props from the lonely southern plantation set in a miasmic bog to the squeaking bats and creaking coffins, this thriller is a pretty pallid offering." Unquote. It really is a beautiful, well-lit and shot movie. If we could only digitize Lon Chaney Jr. out and replace him with someone else. All of the other actors, especially Louise Albritton, did a pretty outstanding job. I like the plot of the movie and especially the ending. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Evelyn Ankers was cast as Claire Caldwell. Ankers was Lon Chaney Jr.'s old wolfing buddy, as she was first covered in Episode 6, The Wolfman, 1941. For a change, Lon Chaney Jr. played the role of Count Dracula. Chaney was covered in Episode 5 of Mice and Men, 1939. This was the only time Chaney Jr. played a vampire. Thank God. Etta McDaniels had a small role as the doc's maid, Sarah. McDaniels was first covered in The Prisoner of Shark Island, 1936, which had John Carradine, who should have been Count Alucard in this movie. Robert Page played the role of Frank Stanley. Page was born in Indiana in 1910. He attended West Point before deciding to become an actor. He first got into radio and then began doing shorts in 1931. He was a contract player for a number of studios and was a solid B-list actor. His first big film was Cain and Mabel, 1936, and it was followed by Smart Blonde, 1937, and Meet the Boyfriend, 1937. He did a little better in the late 1930s and early 40s with films such as Highway Patrol, 1938, The Main Event, 1938, Flying G-Men, 1939, Emergency Squad, 1940, Women Without Names, 1940, Golden Gloves, 1940, Dancing on a Dime, 1940, and The Monster and the Girl, 1941. For a time, it seems he was going to make it as a crooner with movies like Can't Help Singing, 1944, Hellapalooza, 1941, Pardon My Sarong, 1942, What's Cookin', 1942, and How About It, 1943. However, he fared better in movies like Son of Dracula, 1943, and Fired Wife, 1943. By the 1950s, Page had moved to television and then back to radio. By 1970, he was working a political job. He died in 1987. The stunning Louise Albritton played Catherine or Kay Caldwell. Albritton was born in Oklahoma in 1920. Family moved to Texas, but Albritton attended the University of Oklahoma for 2 years before leaving to study at the Pasadena Playhouse. She was often told she was too tall for movie work, but she continued to study and act in plays. Just when she was thinking about giving it up, a Columbia scout offered her a role in a film. She was in a bad film, Not a Ladies' Man, 1942, with Fay Wray, and then another stinker, Parachute Nurse, 1942. Finally, she switched to Universal. She made a total of 24 films, of which 23 have been released. In 1946, she married CBS reporter Charles Collingwood. Several years later, she left movie work altogether. She died in 1979. Edward Bromberg played Hungarian Professor Laszlo, a noted vampire expert. Bromberg was born in 1943 in the Austria-Hungary Empire, which is now Romania. How convenient. Bromberg was a founding member of the New York Group Theater. Bromberg had a good career as a character actor. Some of his films include Stowaway, 1936, The Mark of Zorro, 1940, Tennessee Johnson, 1942, Phantom of the Opera, 1943, Lady of Burlesque, 1943, maybe the worst film noir title ever produced, Pillow of Death, 1945, Salome Where She Danced, 1945, and Queen of the Amazons, 1947. However, what is more amazing is his downfall. He was accused of being a communist in 1950. He even appeared before the Un-American House Un-American Activities Committee and used the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Edward Dmytryk named him as a communist, and he was blacklisted. He went to England where he could work, but died the next year of a heart attack at the age of 47. Actress Lee Grant was a close friend of Bromberg and spoke at his memorial. Her speech got her placed on the blacklist too. She was not able to resurrect her career until In the Heat of the Night, 1967. Adeline DeWalt Reynolds played Hungarian Madam or Queen Zimba. Reynolds was born in Iowa in 1862. She married her husband, who was a vaudeville juggler. She was offered a performing role at the age of 30, but declined to raise her children. In 1905, her husband died. In 1906, she lived through the San Francisco earthquake. In 1926, when she was 64, she entered the University of California. 6 years later, she graduated. She went to Hollywood in 1940 at the age of 78 to begin her acting career. She had a total of 38 credits, with her best-known films being Street of Chance, 1942, The Human Comedy, 1943, Son of Dracula, 1943, Come Live With Me, 1941, and Witness to Murder, 1954. Jimmy the Crow was uncredited as Queen Zimba's crow. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Two men are waiting at the train station to pick up a mysterious visitor. The men are Frank Stanley, Robert Page, and Dr. Brewster, Frank Craven. They tell the conductor that the man is the friend of the Caldwells named Count Alucard. The conductor says there's no one like that on the train, but there is some baggage they can look at. Doc Brewster sees that Alucard is really Dracula by reading the name off the coffin-sized trunk backwards. That night, the coffin-sized boxes are delivered to the appropriately named Dark Oaks Plantation, which I assume by the swamp it is in Louisiana. A strikingly beautiful raven-haired woman, Kay Caldwell, Louise Albritton, comes out of the house and is sad that Count Alucard is not accompanying his coffin-shaped baggage. She asks Matthew to put the coffin-sized boxes in the guest house. Kay's sister, Claire, Evelyn Ankers, comes outside. Kay says she knows the Count is coming that night, even without direct communication. Claire rains on her a little. Kay goes out into the dark, creepy swamp until she reaches the house of a conjure woman, Madame Zimba, Adeline DeWalt Reynolds. Kay is beckoned into the house of Zimba and Jimmy the Crow. Zimba says she willed Kate to the house to warn her of the danger of death hanging over her house and the ruin that it will become. Kay calls the lady Queen Zimba. Zimba says she sees Kay marrying a corpse and living in a grave.
The angel of death hovers over a great house. I see it in ruins. Weeds, vines growing over it. Bats flying in and out the broken windows. Stop him before death comes to Dark Oaks. I see you marrying a corpse, living in a grave.
A bat swoops in and scares the life out of Queen Zimba. Kay sees it all clearly. All things considered, Kay takes it well. She runs back to the big house. That night they have a big party in honor of the expected guest, Count Alucard. Frank is there with Kay and Claire. With the party in full swing, Count Alucard, Lon Chaney Jr., stands in the yard. When he turns, he really looks the part. Inside the party, Colonel Caldwell, George Irving, gets tired and is taken to his bedroom by his manservant. In the yard, Alucard turns into a bat and flies to the Colonel's second-floor bedroom. The bat cruises down the main hall and turns into Alucard. Alucard enters the Colonel's room. Downstairs, Frank is talking to Kay and asks her about Queen Zimba, and he refers to her as an old Hungarian gypsy that she brought back with her. Frank lectures her on the obsession she has had with the dark arts since she met Alucard and returned from Budapest. He says she has changed and he will take her away on a 6-month to 1-year honeymoon. Kay says she has loved Frank since they were kids.
Does that mean you're breaking our engagement?
Oh, no. You mustn't even think that.
Then what is it, Kay? There must be some reason.
Of course there's a reason, Frank. Since we were kids, there's never been anyone in my heart but you. You know that. But, well, don't ever doubt me, Frank. No matter what happens, believe in me. Believe that what I'm doing is best for us both.
She asks him to trust and believe in her no matter what, and it is for both of them. Frank misses this message and just thinks about the other man. He then says he contacted the Hungarian embassy and there is no Count Alucard. Stevens runs out of the house and hollers for Kay. A puff of smoke leaves the second-floor window. Doc Brewster, Frank, Kay, and Claire go to the Colonel's room. There is a fire from where he dropped his cigar. The men put out the fire, and the doc says the Colonel may have just died in his sleep. Frank says he looks like he was frightened to death. Frank also notices 2 holes on the Colonel's neck. The partygoers leave, and Alucard shows up at the front door, demanding to be announced.
Announce Count Alucard. Explain that I came by motor and was delayed.
I'm sorry, sir, but Colonel Caldwell died tonight, and the family isn't receiving.
Announce me.
Stevens says the Colonel died and the family is not receiving guests. Alucard demands to be announced. Alucard enters the house, so I guess he is already invited by Kay. Doc Brewster places a phone call to Professor Laszlo, J. Edward Bromberg, at Murrayfield University. Laszlo is a Hungarian and an expert on Dracula. Doc asks if Alucard is a Hungarian name and is told it is not. Laszlo also says that the last Count Dracula became a vampire.
Alucard? No. I'm sure there is no such family. The name is not Hungarian.
Well, can you tell me, is it possible there's a Count Dracula still living?
History says the last Count Dracula died in the Middle Ages. Why do you ask?
A certain Count Alucard is visiting a friend of mine. I happen to notice that the name spelled backward is Dracula. It made me curious.
That is strange. According to the legends of my people, the last Count Dracula became one of the undead, a vampire, and was finally destroyed in the 19th century. I am considered somewhat of an authority on the subject.
Laszlo advises the doc to be careful with Alucard. Some days later, family and friends gather for the reading of the Colonel's will. The will says he divides his estate equally between his 2 daughters, Claire and Kay. Kay stands up and says there is a more recent will. This will gives Dark Oaks to Kay, and Claire gets all the loot. Kay says she doesn't want to see the plantation sold. When the judge says she will have to have money to run the plantation, Frank says he will take care of it. The doc says all of the servants have run away. Outside of the room, Claire says she doesn't think Kay will ever marry Frank. She says she has seen Kay and Alucard talking in the house. The doc wants to check the guest house to see if Alucard is living there. He and Claire go to the guest house. They find some of Alucard's trunks, but not the coffin-shaped ones. All of the trunks are empty. The doc asks Claire to go and stay in town. The doc is going to talk to Kay about leaving. He then brings up swearing out an insanity report on Kay to save her. That night, Kay dashes out of the house and drives away. Frank is spying on her from behind a tree. She drives out into the local swamp, and Alucard's coffin slowly rises from beneath the water. He exits the box, and a puff of smoke floats across the water to the waiting Kay. He does some fancy hand kissing, but no biting. Frank pulls up in the car as Kay and Alucard drive away. They travel to the local Justice of the Peace, where back in the day you could get married at any time, day or night. The Justice of the Peace is a little suspicious, but hey, $2 is $2. I think Alucard makes a storm, but it's not clear. Alucard carries his new bride over the threshold at the plantation. How sweet. Kay says everything has worked out as planned and that they have sole ownership of the plantation. Alucard comments on how he likes the land around these parts. Now I'm going to go off script a bit here. Do you remember in Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire in 1994? While Lestat, Tom Cruise hooked up with Louise, Brad Pitt? It was for the plantation. Same plot as this movie. I'm sure it'll work out better for these guys. Back in this movie, Alucard is offering eternal life to Kay. He is about to bite Kay when Frank knocks on the door. Frank is shocked when Kay says that she has married Alucard. Frank tries to throw Alucard out of town. Alucard grabs Frank by the neck and throws him across the floor. Frank pulls out a revolver. Kay hides behind Alucard. Frank shoots Alucard and the bullets go through him, killing Kay. Alucard gives Frank stink eyes but lets him go. Frank runs across the land with Alucard following him in bat form but not attacking. Frank falls down in a cemetery and Alucard changes from bat to human form. The moon shines through a cross protecting the body of Frank and Alucard is driven away. Doc Brewster is at home reading up on Dracula. I believe he's reading from the Bram Stoker novel. Frank weakly knocks on the door. Frank tells the doc that he has killed Kay by shooting through Alucard. Alucard fixes a nice bed of earth inside of Kay's coffin. The doc goes to Dark Oaks and enters the big house. Alucard sees him go in and gets upset. The doc creeps around and finally goes to the basement. He finds a pen with live chickens. Inside of Alucard's box are chicken feathers. Dang, that's bad as being a rat-eating vampire. Alucard comes in behind Doc and asks what he's doing there. The doc almost drops dead.
May I inquire what you are doing here?
I was about to ask you the same question.
Tonight, Miss Colville and I were married. I am now master of this house. You see, you owe me an explanation.
Alucard confirms that he and Kay were married and he is now master of the plantation. Alucard takes the doc up to the bedroom and Kay is sitting there and appears to be alive. However, she is much whiter in the face. The pair tell the doc that they want to be left alone to do research.
Count Alucard and I were married tonight.
Yes, so the Count told me.
It was the way we wanted it. Quiet and alone. That's the way we're going to live, Doctor.
You see, I'm engaged in some scientific research. It will take up all of our daylight hours.
And we'll have no time for social life.
In the morning, Sarah, Etta McDaniels, tells the doc that Frank has already left. The judge comes in and is waiting on Claire about the insanity complaint against Kay. The judge is called to the phone and told that Frank confessed to killing Kay. The doc and the judge head to the courthouse. The doc tells Sarah that Laszlo is on the way. The sheriff leads the group along with Frank to Dark Oaks. The door to the house is open. Doc goes to the basement, but the coffins are gone. Frank leads him back to the cemetery. The sheriff sees 2 coffins in a mausoleum. They open the lid and find the dead Kay inside. It seems like they didn't check the other. Frank is taken back to jail. When the doc gets home, Laszlo is waiting there. The doc is under investigation as an accessory after the fact. Laszlo educates the doc and explains how a vampire survives by feeding on the blood of others.
Alucard is undoubtedly a vampire. Probably a descendant of Count Dracula.
Are you sure we're not allowing our imagination to run away with our common sense, Professor?
Can you suggest any other explanation for the events of the past few days?
No. Neither can I give a lucid explanation of a vampire.
Broadly speaking, a vampire is an earthbound spirit whose body comes to life at night and scours the countryside, satisfying a ravenous appetite for the blood of the living. This it does by drawing it from the throat of its victim. So long as they return to their graves before sunrise, between then and sunset they remain in a sort of cataleptic state, during which they can be destroyed by 2 different means.
At night, however, they are invulnerable.
As a scientist, Laszlo says he struggles with believing in vampires. Laszlo explains that Alucard has soil in his coffin from his home country. Laszlo tells the forms a vampire can take and includes werewolf in the list. Odd. Smoke appears under the door and Alucard pops up. Alucard grabs Doc by the neck, but Laszlo whips a cross on him, driving him away.
How in the world did you drive him away?
I showed him this.
A simple cross.
It would take too long to explain why they fear it, but they do.
As the Doc vows to destroy Alucard, a lady brings in a small boy. Laszlo and the Doc find the puncture wounds on his neck. The Doc paints crosses on the wounds. They talk, and Laszlo explains that the boy will not become a vampire because he was not drained dry.
Tell me, does that mean that Tommy is in danger of becoming a vampire himself?
No, unless Alucard drained so much blood from him that he died.
Well, what about Kay? She died from bullet wounds, and yet you implied that she would become a vampire?
Yes, but her case was different. Her background was... And I rather believe that Miss Caldwell may have made the transition from choice.
However, they make a case for Kay becoming a vampire after she was killed by saying she was willing. A little hole. Laszlo says that Kay had a fear of death. They will ask Claire to order the cremation of Kay. Laszlo and Doc go to get Claire and take her to see Frank in the jail. At the morgue, Kay turns into smoke and leaves her coffin. Kay turns into a bat before traveling to the jail where she feeds on Frank. She then takes human form and wakes him. She then says that she loves him and she did all of this so they can live forever as a mortal after Frank kills Alucard.
I don't love him, Frank. I never did.
But you're married to him.
I had to, Frank. It was part of the plan I told you about in the garden. I asked you to have faith in me then. I beg you to have faith in me now.
Kay says Alucard is Count Dracula. She won't let Frank say vampire. He has to use the word undead. Politically correct vampires. Kay tells Frank he has no choice. Claire shows up and the jailer says Frank has been talking to himself in two different voices. Frank tells Claire that Kay has been there to visit him. Claire says she is going to have Kay cremated. Frank goes nuts and starts screaming that Kay is alive and immortal. Kay is hiding in the cell and knows about the cremation. After Claire leaves, Kay says they may have to kill Claire and the Doc. Kay tells Frank where Alucard's coffin is located. Kay tells him where she will be as well. She then turns to smoke, unlocks the cell, and gets a gun for Frank. Laszlo suspects Kay's plan. Frank escapes the jail and takes a car. The Doc and Laszlo learn from the guard about killing or destroying Alucard. The jailer tells that Alucard is by the swamp drainage canal. Doc, Laszlo, and the sheriff go to the morgue. Kay and the coffin are missing. Frank makes it to the swamp just before sunup. He begins stuffing Alucard's coffin with straw for a fire. Alucard comes in by bat and turns to human form. He is about to kill Frank when he sees that his coffin is on fire. Alucard screams for Frank to put out the fire before knocking him to the ground. When he sees he can't save the coffin, Alucard begins choking Frank. However, the sun comes up. Alucard falls into the water and is changed to bones by the sunlight. Frank arrives at Dark Oaks just ahead of Doc, Laszlo, and the sheriff. Frank goes to the childhood playhouse of Claire and Kay. He opens Kay's coffin, and she is laying there as beautiful as ever. He takes a ring from her finger and places it on her wedding finger. When the other three men show up, Frank has set Kay's coffin on fire. He watches the flames. Dark ending. World famous short summary, stick to werewolfing. Hope you enjoyed today's show. I really appreciate you spending the time listening. You can find connections to social media and email on the site at classicmovierev.com. There are links in the podcast show notes as well. Remember, this show is completely free and independent. All that I ask is you jump over to Apple Podcasts and give me a review. It really helps the show get found. Beware the Moors.